Hi, this is Delaney. Before we start the episode, I just want to ask a tiny favor. Would you mind right now looking at your phone, if that's how you're listening to me, and find where it says rate the show and give it some stars? That actually really helps the podcast spread. And we're all about having this be something we all do together. The more people that are finding solutions for screen time, the more it helps all of us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now on to the show. Hello, I'm Delaney Reston, physician of Tweens on Up, creator of the 4 Screenagers movies, and this is the Screenagers podcast, a show about discovering the best ways to help our youth and ourselves navigate our rapidly changing digital world. Today I share my enlightening conversation with Joanne Finkelstein, a clinical psychologist and author of the recently released excellent book, Sexism and Sensibility. Dr. Finkelstein has spent decades working with teens and families, and she has spent years studying and writing about how bias, social justice, and mental health intersect. She is a blogger for Psychology Today, and her writings have also appeared in The Washington Post, Your Teen, and many others. In addition, her work has been highlighted in the New York Times, Women's Health, Oprah Daily, CNN, and more. Joanne's book, Sexism and Sensibility, focuses on the psychological impacts that sexism has on our girls and our boys and what to do about that. Our conversation today provides many practical insights for all kids, no matter what their gender is. And I mean it. If you have boys, this show is really also for you as well. It helps us to raise empowered kids, given the sexism that exists both online and offline. She really is a wealth of information and strategies. I begin by asking Joanne about the relatively recent viral trend surrounding Tradwives, short for traditional wives. These women, many of whom have amassed large followings, share posts that often feature them embracing a sexy, domestic, perfectly laid out, stay-at-home lifestyle, seeming perfectly happy to do so. These videos highlight ideas of being dutiful wives, including being submissive to their husbands. It's really had me concerned. Okay, let's begin. Joanne Finkelstein, welcome to the Screenagers podcast. If you could speak a little bit what Tradwife is and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, girls are so often brought up to put other people's needs and comforts ahead of their own. And that is sort of what Tradwife life is pushing. This sort of subservience to men, their needs and their comfort is more important than our own. So I don't think they're great role models for girls by any means. I think we have made life for working mothers very difficult. And I'll get to how Tradwives do in a second. But, rather than fix the system with stuff like universal child care, equal pay, et cetera, and more help from dads, there's been this push to make it women's fault. They just can't handle having it all. And there's been this romancing of traditional gender roles. And that's not to say that it's not right for some people. But for most families in this day and age, it's not realistic. We need to have 2 working adults in a family to get by. And a Tradwife lifestyle undermines women's autonomy and economic independence. And one of the reasons that our society has moved away from these traditional gender roles is because it wasn't working for women. Women felt trapped economically, or they lacked a sense of purpose, and they felt infantilized by being subservient to another adult. And the thing is, the Tradwives that we're seeing online are making oodles of money. It's so ironic, right? Look at Ballerina Farm, right? This is her business. And even if it weren't, she's got a whole team behind her making everything look perfect and creating unrealistic ideals for mothers everywhere just trying to get by. So yes, I have some strong feelings about these online Tradwives.
No, that's brilliant. And I wish it was just hypothetical, but it actually does impact females and males. And I'm thinking of a young man I know whose friend is indeed, when he's online dating, he's been talking about wanting somebody, a female, to kind of take care of him. And he's right out of college and he's on a lot of these sites. I mean, this has an impact.
And he is from divorced parents, a single mom, and yet the power of those influencers can be real, and they're just going to get more and more through their algorithms.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, that kid that you're talking about who's right in that spot to be influenced, right? Like, his whole teenage years, he was probably influenced by this sort of what we call the manosphere. Boys are actually in a state of crisis. There's a huge increase in loneliness, and it's something we have to take seriously. But the manosphere, as we'll call it, are taking advantage of that. And they're leveraging boys' loneliness to blame women, to say it's because of women that you feel this way. And so it's just another way to blame women. I mean, boys are lonely and we have to take that seriously, but it's not the girl next door's fault.
Well, let's start by talking about sexism. And this quandary I know raising a girl is when we talk, particularly when they're younger, about how the system is stacked, not in favor for girls as males, that it can make us feel like we're disempowering them some way. We don't know when and how to bring that up because we want them to feel like they can do anything. And I wondered how you respond to that dilemma we feel as parents of girls.
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's really tricky, and it's a big part of why I wrote Sexism and Sensibility. I actually addressed my concerns in the book about that with my own daughter. I worried that talking about it would rob her of the notion that she lived in a fair world and create fear and feelings of inferiority that weren't there yet, right? So mostly I would stick to pointing out counter-stereotypical role models like a dad who stays home with his kids or a woman who runs her own business rather than pointing out overt sexism. And, like many people, I gave her books with strong female characters. I brought her to women's marches. I bought her RBG paraphernalia. But over time, I heard in her questions and in her disappointment a need to understand why, the girl never wins on MasterChef Junior, or how Hillary could lose to a man who bragged about violating women, or why loud boys don't get in trouble at school, but loud girls do. And I see how my teenage patients blame themselves when they're slut-shamed, despite some of them expressing a strong feminist identity even, or they buy into their own fragility even as they tout women are badasses, or they spend hours on their appearances, even as they feel envy that boys can sleep an hour longer because they don't have to, quote unquote, get ready. And they feel selfish when they protect their time or mean when they feel anger. So if we don't want them absorbing demeaning messages that wreak havoc on their psyches, we have to find ways to help them understand that the culture is broken, they are not broken.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And thankfully, there are endless examples of everyday sexism that we can capitalize on by turning those into teachable moments. And I always like to say, not all of them, or they'll tune you out pretty quickly. But if we focus on these teachable moments, we can introduce sexism to our kids in more palatable ways. We can help them see those casual insults that are so common that they start to seem normal, start to add up and chip away at their dignity and their self-esteem. So when things do happen, whether it's a catcall, a snapped bra strap, or a PMS joke about their mood, they're not going to feel less than, or at least they'll understand it's not that they're weak and need to grow a thicker skin. Mm-hmm. It's actually behavior that they shouldn't have to put up with.
I want to make sure we talk about boys too, because your work is so great at really saying we have to equally be bringing boys into this conversation.
Absolutely. And a lot of these teachable moments can be for boys too. The media is a great place to start using teachable moments. Let's say you're watching a show with younger kids. You can point out, for example, that female characters often use magic to solve problems, while male characters use science or their physicality.
What show are you thinking of?
Oh, I mean, there's a million. The witches shows, and believe me, I love witches, and I love the shows about magic.
Just thinking of I Dream of Jeannie and The Bewitched of what we grew up with.
Absolutely.
Never stop to think about that. It's super interesting.
You might say something like, they make it seem like girls in real life might not be able to solve problems because real girls don't have magic. But that's silly because we know girls are also clever, good at science, fast on their feet, whatever point you're trying to make.
So talking to boys, what are some specifics to think about if we have boys in our families who are 10, 12, 14, even starting younger, of course?
Yeah, it's really tricky to teach boys about structural privilege without shaming them, right? Privilege is usually invisible to boys and men. But when they're made aware of it and the harmful effects of it, research shows that sexist attitudes diminish. So it's really worthwhile to take on that project. And I mean, many boys have no idea that girls grow up learning to be hypervigilant and that if they're assaulted, they're blamed for being in the wrong place in the wrong clothes, while boys generally have the privilege of body autonomy. So I think the best way to help them understand is to show them that boys suffer too in a patriarchal culture. Sexism is not good for boys too. They're expected to cut off a huge portion of their humanity in the name of being tough. There's this boy code that it inhibits them from being emotionally vulnerable and forming the deep connections necessary for a meaningful life. Repressing feelings and needs is bad for mental and physical health, and it gets in the way of men seeking care. So what we want to do is raise boys to value relational qualities like caring, connection, cooperation, right? We want to make these aspirational for boys, not emasculating. So I'll just say one more thing. The overarching goal is to practice egalitarian parenting and build a sufficient, I'll call it a sexism detector in boys too, so that denigrating all things feminine will no longer be this kind of acceptable sport.
What you just mentioned is important in terms of boys being able to own their full spectrum of their being. Also, I'm curious how you talk about the fact that females don't fare as well system-wide.
I mean, I've done this with my own son. He's a force and he's got a lot to say. And my daughter used to be a lot more soft-spoken. And so I would say, hey, honey, you're interrupting Gabby. And I really want to hear Gabby's contribution to this topic. And then at other times I've added, research shows us that girls in this culture get interrupted far more than boys. And I know you're not doing it on purpose. And I want to hear what you have to say too. But we just want to make sure that we're always making room for people who have less of a voice in this world.
Oh, that's beautiful. I've been really disturbed recently about the just ongoing sexualized characters that are in the movies.
It reminds me of a story that I tell in Sexism and Sensibility about a mom named Julie, whose 15-year-old daughter, Annie, is dressing in a way that clashed with the school's dress code. And Julie, she admitted to me that she found her daughter's style a little bit trashy. But she also was clear that she wanted to support her daughter's process of finding herself. She understood where, what teenage development is all about. Annie, her daughter, was ordered to report to the school office every morning for 2 weeks to have her outfit approved. Then she'd head to the girls' bathroom to change into the more revealing clothes she preferred. She was proud of her body. She liked the attention from boys. And Julie named the double bind that I think so many of us feel and that you're talking about. And she said, I was stuck between you go girl, happy that her daughter was able to hold on to her own desires, and don't you realize people will see you and treat you as a sex object? Kind of sad that her daughter had internalized the male gaze and all of the imagery that we see in the media. Therein lies the tension. We want our daughters to learn that they deserve full body autonomy, to own their own sexuality, and we want to protect them from a culture that sexualizes and judges them. So if we go around critiquing all these superstars, right, like J-Lo, Ariana Grande, we're going to seem out to lunch. And I found as a mom and a therapist to many girls that the only, quote unquote answer is ongoing conversation and encouragement to think critically about the cultural messages. Like if we're hand-wringing and there's moral panic, it just makes us seem old-fashioned, and it does like nothing to earn our kids' respect, which is what they need if they're going to listen to us. So my goal with my own daughter has always been to help her think critically about her choices, not to control them. So I try to let her make her own decisions, but also help her think honestly about how those choices are made within a system that believes girls' value lies mainly in their sex appeal. I once said to her, a crop top dieting or Brazilian wax is never as simple as free choice. And she got it. And we can talk to girls about this faux empowerment that they're seeing all over social media and regular media. That's the idea that feeling empowered isn't the same thing as actual empowerment.
Because it is a powerful feeling to be desired. And yet you so brilliantly say in the book, it comes at such a cost, because if you're existing to get that admiration that way, then in tricky situations, you don't feel like you can speak up. You know, they liked you for whatever, how you looked or whatnot, not by speaking up. And they become beholden to that. And it can really play out in unfortunate sexual situations and relationships.
Yes. Oh, it's such a good point, right? Because we are teaching girls that this is powerful, that this is how you should look, and your looks and your desirability are your most important assets, but they're not taught as much to speak up and say, just because I look like this doesn't mean I'm asking for something, we need to have a conversation about this. We're sort of proactively talking to them about what they can expect. Even if you're talking to, you said middle school, like a girl who's going through puberty, about how men might start to look at her differently, and that the culture tends to focus on her sexuality at the expense of all of her other amazing qualities. So you're always sort of saying, like, you are so amazing in so many ways, and it's the culture's problem. It is not your problem. In my experience with girls, it actually makes them want to fight harder for their rights and their dreams, because we've given them the context and language that they need to make sense of all the demeaning and objectifying experiences. So often what we consider sexualized isn't the intent of the girl. They're following fashions and trends, and that's what teen brands are selling. So when we comment, we risk sexualizing them and making them feel icky in the very way we're trying to protect them from others making them feel. We're walking this very fine line.
I remember a teen friend of my daughter's in middle school, and how she was in tears because her mom said how inappropriate she was. She was really impacted by it. And I'm wondering if that's what you meant. They feel stuck in a hard place. They want to pose, get that attention, but they also know that the parents are concerned. Many of these girls are conflicted, not that they're trying to be sexual, but just knowing that if the parent sees a post, might very well say, no, I'm not okay with that. Look at you. And that can actually hurt them.
Yeah. I mean, girls tell me all the time that they're sexualized against their will so often that suggestive posts are a way to take back control of their sexuality.
What do you mean by that?
Girls are just sexualized all the time, right? They're walking out on the street by their parents. They don't yet think of themselves as a sexual being, but then they get sexualized constantly. And so,
meaning
they're catcalled or
their parent says something.
Yes. I mean, it can be. We have to be very careful. If they don't see themselves as a sexual being yet, the words we use are very important. So if we say you look too sexy, or, maybe that's a little too adult, or even we explain it as I want you to be able to wear whatever clothes you want, but people will judge and people will comment and they will think you're older than you are. And that makes me worry for your safety. And so we really need to have this be an ongoing conversation. We're talking about two different groups of people here. We're talking about kids who are not that aware of their sexuality yet. then parents comment on it and they feel self-conscious and they feel embarrassed and ashamed. And we've sort of lost our mode of communication with them right there. Then there's the other girls that are out there and they're posting really suggestive posts. They're posting in bikinis. They're showing everything but their nipples, whatever it is. And I have had girls tell me in my office, and this is also what we're finding in the research, that these girls say, you know, the whole world is sexualizing me. I may as well make money off it, or I may as well enjoy the attention. You know, it's a way that they can feel more in control of a world that sexualizes them.
So that brings up that challenging question of how much we validate our kids. We show our girls that we think that they're smart. We point these things out, that they're creative, that they are caring. In interviews I've heard with you, you are very judicious about even mentioning looks, even though they're bombarded with a look culture. I want to hear how you think through this.
I would say it's because they're bombarded with a look culture. They're going to get it everywhere else, right? And when I dug into the research, it really just confirmed how destructive the intense focus on girls' appearance is. Beauty culture teaches girls that their most important asset is their appearance. And literally across the world, most girls believe that. So they end up spending nearly double that of boys on their appearance, double the amount of time. While a boy is practicing his instrument or even his hand-eye coordination in video games, girls are trying to fix their so-called flaws. Mm-hmm. And that's an exaggeration because girls are amazing and they do all kinds of amazing things.
Yeah.
But the more other people focus on their appearance, the more girls start to view themselves from an outsider's perspective. In other words, they start to objectify themselves the way other people objectify them. And this self-objectification can lead to habitual self-monitoring and shame and anxiety about their bodies, which puts them, we know, at risk for lots of things, eating disorders, depression. But, and I'm getting to your question, beyond the body, it actually steals cognitive resources from them. Girls who self-objectify, who are thinking about how they look all of the time, they have more difficulty getting into flow states, which you need for performance and achievement. So even if you just compliment a girl, you might improve her mood, but you're impairing her mental capacity. So it's worth wondering, how often does a girl receive a body comment right before an important test or a piano recital? I like to tell parents to think twice before they tell their kid that she looks cute as she's walking out the door to go to school, let's say. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's natural to tell our daughters they're beautiful because to us, they truly are. And we've grown up in this lookism culture. So no one should beat themselves up when they comment on their kids' appearance. But it's important. It's really important to notice how often you're commenting on her appearance and various body parts, especially compared to her brothers, and to shift the focus to their character, creativity, and ideas. I tell parents to save the "you're so beautiful" for that belly laugh that she just gave you, or after a thoughtful discussion about climate change or something. If you tell her she's beautiful, then she'll know you mean all of her and not just focus on the aesthetics.
When I was in Berkeley in the 60s, 70s, 80s, growing up, feminism was a great word and no problem there. Now we're getting to the point where many girls are high school, college age, are really, and it's been this way for a while. They're a little defensive. They're on the fence. Is it okay to be feminist? Not. And males too.
There's more girls than ever that identify as feminist. Many of them are all about my body, my choice. I think you're getting at like some of the misconceptions that this is sort of anti-male. And it's really not. I really, truly believe that if you believe in women's equality, if you believe in women's rights or human rights, then you are a feminist. And of course, there's anger in the world, and people do not like women's anger at all. We bring our girls up to not be angry and to be very pleasant. and we don't necessarily tolerate strong opinions in girls and women. And so it can be off-putting when you see somebody online that's spouting feminist stuff and being mad at a man. But overall, like, a feminist movement is not anti-male. And it's as much about showing men that a patriarchal system doesn't work for them either. We all need agency. And if men and women could all see that and see that that is what feminism is basically working toward, I think that there wouldn't be as much pushback.
Yeah. And I think we started out by talking about what we can be talking about with boys. Absolutely, to have them realize, to say that they're a feminist is just so badass. It's so important. It's so obvious that they would want that. Our kids want equality. They really do. Hate injustice. When things are unfair, they don't feel good about it. So helping them to understand, this is what feminism means. We just want equality. We want the same chance at things. We want to be able to have the opportunities, and we want to increase the chance of feeling good about ourselves.
Unless you have influencers that are saying, well, the reason you feel this way is because women want too much, and they're taking your jobs and your whatever away from you, your dignity, rather than helping men progress and recognize their own abilities to connect and not task women with doing all of the emotional labor.
What are some other, particularly around social media or any other online stuff, that you like to talk about when you're speaking with parents?
Keeping open conversation is really important. I mean, I said to my son not that long ago, if you had different parents and a different extended family, you could have been one of those guys like Aiden Ross, or, you know, one of those people who believed Aiden Ross. And he said, oh, yes, definitely. Right? Because, I mean, he's in college now. He's a computer science major. He's had businesses online. He's been streaming forever and ever and ever. Right? So, you know, and I don't think it's all us. I think, A, he was bringing it to us, so that made it easier for us to talk about it. And B, he is very logical, and he saw these guys sort of changing and could tell that part of it was making money. Saying these things made them more money, got them more sponsors. So there's that.
More inflammatory, more emotional things, like, oh,
anti-woman things.
Yes. And look, oh, I get more attention.
Yeah. And, you know, for girls, you really want to help her become like a critical consumer of social media. Tune into her feelings while she's scrolling, right? Ask her to reflect on how she feels when she's looking at certain images or accounts. Can she stop following an account that induces negative feelings? Can she start following accounts with empowered messages, like, you know, by searching hashtag girl power, hashtag stop sexualizing women? You know, and as they become more conscious of their feelings, the hope is that they'll choose more encouraging content and that the algorithm will follow suit. And the last thing I'll say is it can be helpful. It can be really useful to share research with them, right? We can tell them that research shows kids feel worse about their bodies when they spend too much time on social media. We can explain or remind them how algorithms are designed to keep them hooked and can literally identify when they feel insecure or worthless and vulnerable to advertising because they've paused over a certain ad for acne solutions or weight loss or whatever.
I can imagine if they're pausing over someone who's saying, when you're feeling depressed or something like that, then the system knows, oh, they're at a low mood. Let's quickly bombard them with images of something that'll make them feel better. This drink or this whatever it is, substances, is one of our films is on.
Yes.
The desire for the dopamine from cannabis or vaping.
Yeah, for sure. Or even just products that will make you, you know, like if you fix your eyelashes, you will be happy. There's your answer.
Yeah. And I did a podcast episode with some teens who said, oh, I don't think I get that many ads. I said, let's take out our phones and look. And it was just mind blowing to them how it's so subconscious that they're being fed all of these. They really aren't stopping and even processing it, but it's getting in there.
Wow, that seriously just made my jaw drop. Like that they're not noticing the ads is.
Yes.
Oof, that's destructive.
I know.
So yeah,
exactly.
We got to just keep pointing out how they're being targeted because you know what? Teenagers do not like to be manipulated. Nobody does, but teenagers, they don't like hypocrisy. They don't like manipulation. So point that out.
This is so great to talk about this because it's just so dear to my heart. And it's disheartening that there's a lot of ways that things are worse right now, given the bombardment of and the intensity by which females are portrayed. So for us to stop and have this conversation, to share this with kids and teens is important. I feel like we covered a lot of concrete tips, and I can't say enough how many new studies I hadn't known about in your book. And that is the work that we do here at Screenagers with the documentaries and the podcasts. It's all about sharing stories in science to share with young people over and over, new science, new data. We want them to be critical thinkers, and we want them to be data-driven with reliable data that they really do absorb over time. They feel like, oh, a good case was made for this, not just they told me and said, just believe it.
That is precisely why I included so many studies in the book, because I want parents to realize, like, oh, this actually, like, sexism actually really chips away at my daughter's sense of self and my daughter's sense of potential. But I know that can be dry, right? Which is why I include so many stories from my therapy practice. And I also made it like, if people want to go in and see just the tips, I put little arrows on all the tips that are in there. So it's sort of filled with like tips and scripts that they can use with their kids to make a dent in this whole sexist society we live in.
I know I kept you longer, but I knew it would be so fun to talk with you.
Such a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad we did this.
I want to thank our guest, Joanne Finkelstein. And in the show notes, I will link to places you can find her work and her book, Sexism and Sensibility. All her writings are truly such a delight to read. She is a whiz with words and ideas. Make sure to also check out her Substack blog called The Feminist Parent.
What a gift that you tuned into the show today. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast to get each episode automatically. Check out Screenagersmovie.com to get resources for each episode and loads of other resources. Learn about our 4 Screenagers films and find my weekly parenting blog, Tech Talk Tuesdays. And be sure to use the search bar to find many topics you might be wondering about among hundreds of my past blogs. Finally, I love hearing from you, so email me at Delaney@Screenagersmovie.com. What ideas do you want to hear for future episodes? Today's show was produced by the following people: me, your host, Delaney Rustin, Lisa Tabb, Rebecca Tolan, and sound editing was done by Alan Gofinski.